Hey guys, I'm Pascal from Pixel, and in case you hadn't noticed, today's video is going to be talking about pricing. Pricing your game, to be exact. Some people ask me, based on the video from 2 weeks ago, how do I get to a certain price for my games, and how do you decide it, and what do you base it on? So I think it's a good topic for a video, so let's get going. Alright, so a few weeks ago I did the premium versus freemium video, and if you haven't watched it you can find it up here, the little link thing. And I got a few questions from various people, and one of the first one was like this one. So what is the strategy for pricing games? It's a tough question to answer, but I'm gonna do it anyway because, well, that's what these videos are for. I'm gonna use the example on how I base the price of every game I release. What do I base it on? There are three main factors to base it on, and that's basically what I'm gonna talk about in this video. So let's go and let's start with the first factor. Marketplace is the first of the factors, and probably the most deciding factor of all these things I'm gonna mention, because marketplace is out of your control. Basically, people on PCs, on Steam platform, on Steam Marketplace are used to higher prices than people on the App Store, on the Google Play Store. Mobile games are, there are a lot of free games, so you're already competing with a bunch of free games. So asking a price for your game is already going to be, I can do this cheap game, or I'm going to buy your game, so your game better be good. If your price is $9.99 or higher on the App Store, you're also competing with thousands of games that are at least half the price of your game. So your game has to be extremely well to even go into a competition with that. On the other hand, if you try to sell your game on Steam and you use a very low price like $2.99 or $3.99, people tend to think it's a pretty cheap game, so it might just be a little budget crap thingy, and they're not even gonna waste time looking at it because they have all these other games at $9.99 and $14.99 and higher that are probably much more premium and bigger and better than your game at just $2.99. So marketplace is an extremely big factor when you decide on what kind of price you're gonna put on your game, and it's out of your control, so deal with it. Bringing us to factor 2. Size does matter, people. Seriously, a certain game can just look small, tiny, and that usually gives out a certain vibe of making it a cheaper game. Even if it has a lot of replayability, a game like, let's say Pac-Man, everybody knows it, it has a replayability of 30 years because it's still fun, it's still the same game, but there's not a lot there. We all know it's a fun game, but it's very tiny, very small. For example, Meganoid 2017, due to its roguelike nature, there is a lot of replayability in it, but it's a very small game in scope. So I priced it a little lower than, for example, Ashworld, which is a pretty big game content-wise. It has a lot of storyline. It has different stuff like overworld, driving, platform action, shooting. There is just a lot of content there, a lot of things to do, and it's just bigger in size. The game looks bigger than Meganoid. So that's the second factor I put into deciding on the price. How much content is there? Does it look like a huge game, or is it just more a tiny game, and then we change the price according to that one. So that brings us to factor 3. Time is the third factor, and it's the biggest and the hardest one to explain. Obviously, if you put a lot of time in a game, you most likely want to earn enough money to recoup that investment of time. However, you can create a very tiny game that had 6 months of just working on the game mechanics, and then another 3 or 4 months to work on the actual content. The content is still pretty small because you only had 3 to 4 months to work on that content, because you wasted 6 months on finding that little game mechanic that nobody ever thought about. And you can then have a huge game that just took maybe 1 or 2 weeks to get the base and the core mechanics up and running, but then took 10 months to create content. So the value that the player sees is basically the content you created and not the extra work you put into the game mechanic. Which is also the hardest part on making games. Scope and planning and knowing what you're gonna make is the key thing to creating games that actually make you some money. You can't waste a lot of time on finding new game mechanics if you don't have money in the bank. because you need to make money on that game, so it needs to be shipped and created and completed as soon and quick as possible. If you add a lot of content, that's great because everybody's gonna see that content and the price can go up. But if you waste most of your time on actually the game mechanics, nobody's gonna see that. Nobody's gonna notice that you put in 6 or 8 months of game mechanic code and then just 2 or 3 months content. They only see the content. They see how many levels you have, how many graphics, how many animations. They don't see all the extra time in there. So that's very hard to decide and very hard factor to use. Figure out what you want, figure out if you can make it work within that time limit, and then just set a price for your game based on these 3 factors. Feelings, yes, there are 3 main factors as I just explained. But the 4th factor that is maybe not really a factor, it's a feeling. You are the game developer, you're the designer of the game, you worked hard on it, so it has a certain value for you. You put in time, energy, and maybe resources, money for music, money for graphics, whatever. It has a certain value for you and you shouldn't undermine that value. So find a price for your game that you are very comfortable with. You're never gonna set the right price point. There's always people gonna complain, well, this game is too expensive, I'm not buying that. You're always gonna have people saying, well, this game is way too cheap, it's probably garbage, I'm not buying that. So you're never gonna make everybody happy. Deal with it, live with it, just make sure you are comfortable and happy with the price you put on your own product. One final tip is to always go at the maximum you want this price to be. You can always go down with discounts and sales, but you can rarely go up with your price. So make sure you're not undercutting your own price. If you want it at around $4, make sure it's $4.99 or maybe even $5.99. You can always go down with a discount, but you can never go up. If you already priced it $3.99, you can't go to the $5.99. So and that's it for this week's video, I guess. If you liked it, let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up. Also, let me know what you think in general about game prices. Do you think games are cheap or expensive? Let me know, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye. Ooh, I should really stop putting these little things on the lens.